So, Doctor, Alzheimer's has become such a big problem in this country. Uh, you're an educated woman, you're a doctor, you do your research, you find something that you think might, you know, start a spark or something, but it had trouble catching on.
Yeah.
Why is that? Why weren't more people saying, hey, let's look into this?
Right, right. I know I did everything I could
Yeah.
think of to try to get this information out. The medical food was still a year away from being out on the market, and it was available over the counter. You know, I knew as coconut oil, and then I learned that MCT oil is available over the counter too. I just bought it for $9 a bottle, a 4-pack on Amazon the other day. I mean, that's a very inexpensive
Yeah.
treatment, and that's enough to last for months.
Okay.
So I started a letter writing campaign, and my sister Angela suggested that the first one I write to is Supreme Court Justice Sandra Day O'Connor. She was on the Alzheimer's study group. Her husband had Alzheimer's at that point, and that seemed like a very logical place to start. And I basically wrote her a letter relaying, you know, what I have told you, you know, what I had learned about this medical food and how it would work, and that it did work. And I realized my husband's only one case, but he's proof of you know, that this is possible, and that if he responded, other people would respond. And what I suggested was that this you know, this concept regarding this medical food, you know, needed to be looked at urgently, you know, so that this information would get out to the masses, you know, people, so that they could try this. And they did have clinical trials. They were relatively small trials. It wasn't just purely speculative, and they had a longer study with 152 people that, again, showed over a period of months that there was improvement in roughly half the people that took it. So, you know, I felt like this is the best thing out there, you know, for Alzheimer's. There's really nothing else, you know, that offers anybody hope. I just felt that they needed their medical people to look at it. If it seemed reasonable, put it on the fast track, you know. Do the clinical trials, you know, whatever needs to be done. And but it being a food, what is the harm in people trying it in the meantime? You know. So I basically got almost no response. You know, the letter to her was forwarded to the Alzheimer's Association, and they basically said, well, we'll look at this and we'll get back with you. And then I didn't hear anything. And 6 weeks or so later, I sent them another letter. But, you know, in the meantime, I wrote to politicians, media people, Fox, CNN, you know, everybody, you know, just to try and get somebody to pay some attention to this. And it was very frustrating, you know, because there are, you know, over 5 million people in the United States suffering from this, and almost 30 million worldwide. And, you know, coconut oil is readily available, and it's on the shelf. And, you know, I remember seeing a documentary that was put out by the Alzheimer's Association. I was watching it, and this man on there said, for all we know, maybe there's something on the shelf that could help people with Alzheimer's. And I'm screaming at him, there is, but nobody will listen to me.
Yeah.
So it was very frustrating. And, you know, the other thing too, you know, that I learned fairly early on was that there was a ketone ester in development at the NIH. And it's the ketone, same ketone, you know, that your body produces when you consume the medium chain triglycerides, or when you break down fat. Dr. Richard Veach at the NIH has been working on this since the 1990s, and he came up with a formulation around 2006 that you know, can be consumed, and your liver will convert it. Part of it's already ketone, and the rest of it is converted to ketone. Crosses the blood-brain barrier. He showed in some of his studies that it would, you know, neurons and of Parkinson's and Alzheimer's models, there are more survivors of neurons that are exposed to this ketone when they put them into cultures. And so it needed clinical testing, but he's basically being ignored. He produces enough that would possibly take care of 1 or 2 people in his lab. I mean, that's how much he can produce.
Okay.
He needs funding for mass production and for clinical trials, and the NIH and, you know, other sources just haven't come through, you know, for this. And it's something that's very promising, and it's not just Alzheimer's. There are other diseases that have a problem with insulin resistance, or, you know, decreased glucose uptake into cells, and Parkinson's is one, Huntington's chorea, MS, diabetes type 1 and 2. I mean, people have, the organs, the eyes, the liver, the kidney, have a problem with insulin resistance, and ketones can address the problem in other organs as well as the brain. People with diabetes are more likely to develop dementia. People with traumatic brain injury, the brain loses the ability to use glucose normally after an insult like that for a period of several days, and that's where a lot of the brain damage comes from. But the apparatus to use ketones is there, so the ketone could provide alternative fuel for that. So it's very frustrating that there's something that promising in a lab here in the U.S. Then the lab's already funded by the NIH, but they just won't allow enough funding to really look at it and do the clinical and push it along. It seems urgent to me that something like that should be pushed along.